live right now, and let's just wait a bit for some of uh,
Yeah.
the audience so that we can utilize our energy better and speak
Yes,
to
of
the
course. We can
audience.
wait. Oh,
Yeah, so we just wait a little while for the
sure.
audience to join in. Okay. So I think some of the viewers are trickling in, so we can begin this session. Good evening,
Right.
everyone. Welcome aboard. Today we have with us ex-sea captain and author Beat Ashok Chatterjee, and we will be talking about his debut non-fiction novel, Mayday, published by Readomania. Welcome to Penmancy Beat Ashok. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And before we dive into this exciting session, I'd like to give a brief introduction of our guest here. Beat Ashok Chatterjee was a ship's captain by profession, and he joined Merchant Navy at a very young age and loved it, retiring only after having completed more than 45 years at sea. This old sea dog lives in New Delhi, India, with his memories and a wife, son, and daughter. His hobbies include listening to Western music, reading fiction, and watching cricket. He also loves good Hollywood and Bollywood movies and a chilled beer. His first collection of short stories, Driftwood Stories Washed Ashore, surprised him with the favorable response. And so he decided that this is what he wanted to do for the rest of his life, which is right. He is also the author of a second volume of stories called The People Tree Stories About Us and Them that have nothing to do with the sea. And his poems have been published in an anthology called Monochrome Verses. Mayday is his first venture into nonfiction. Well, Beat Ashok, your first foray into nonfiction is a smashing hit, I must say. Mayday is a roller coaster. This is what it looks like. The way you've told these stories and these maritime disasters, it's just simply outstanding. The narrative is so intriguing, and the storytelling is just very, very nice. And for those of you who are yet to pick the book, let me just go ahead and share a brief blurb about this book because this would entice you a little bit. The blurb says, "Do you think the ocean is a dangerous place? Yes, it can be. Titanic, Amoco Cadiz, Herald of Free Enterprise, Exxon Valdez, every shipwreck tells a story." Veteran sea captain Beatashok Chatterjee reveals the stories behind 13 of the greatest civilian maritime disasters outside the realms of war that shook the world. Not just for the number of lives lost, but in some cases the damage caused to the environment and livelihoods, or the media attention that these incidents garnered. Allow him to take you back in time and on the high seas, where you can watch and learn from these disasters what, how, and why they took place while remaining at safe distance. Could they have been averted? Well, you'll have to read it out and find out for your own, of find out for yourself. So, Mr. B, um, you have spent a considerable part of your professional life on the seas. How and when did you decide to write this book? Was it something that you wanted all along?
No, I decided very recently, maybe just a year back. Actually, I my forte is short stories, and before this book came out, I had already published two volumes of short stories. One about the sea called Driftwood, and the other one is the People Tree, which has nothing to do with the sea. So that is what I prefer to do. However, the publisher wanted a non-fiction book from me. He was very clear about it. He said that, see, it's non-fiction that sells more, not
Okay.
fiction, and especially not short stories. So he says, get me a non-fiction book, and let's see what we can do with it. Fair enough.
Okay.
So I was wondering, what can I write where non-fiction is concerned? What is my USP? So my USP is shipping, ships and the sea. So I actually started writing something about the origins of trade across the sea. You know,
Okay.
how ships started, how trade, right? Then I found it really boring. You know, I just said, look, if I find it boring, who's gonna, How will anyone else find it interesting? So
Right.
I gave up after 2 chapters. Then
Okay.
one fine day, my son asked me, Papa, why don't you write about shipwrecks, major disasters that took place? Why, when, how? Wow. And that was absolute. I think that gave me the germ of this idea, and then the idea was born. And that's when I started doing my research, and I wrote about major shipwrecks that have occurred in history, not in during wartime, and during peacetime, and how they shook the world, means in different ways.
Right.
So,
So this book has about 13 greatest civilian maritime disasters, like you said. Can you share how you selected these specific incidents to feature in this particular book?
yeah. Uh, See, there are many, many disasters. I mean, there were hundreds of disasters which have, really shaken up everyone. However, I took three criteria. Number one, number of lives lost. Number two, environmental damage caused. That is, the environment is so spoiled and sullied that it destroys livelihoods. It destroys the tourist industry and the fishing industry and destroys marine life. And third, the media attention, the unnecessary media glare that these incidents garnered. Some incidents had all three, but but mainly the major loss of lives occurred from passenger ships. Everyone knows about the Titanic, and the major environmental damage came from these oil tankers, which either ran aground or collided or exploded or something. And the media attention also on some of these ships, which was for all the wrong reasons, where the captain of an oil tanker made it to the cover of Time magazine, you know, because of very bad oil pollution. So these were the criteria I chose, and I chose 13 because 13 is an appropriate number, don't you think?
Okay, so basically, the common thread in these disasters is basically, the forces of nature or technical disasters or those kind of things. So basically, or or it could also be just the human folly, basically, right?
Yeah, if you see anyone reading the book, except for one or two, cases where it was like force of force majeure, an act of God, you know. Otherwise, the common thread running through all these disasters was human error. And
Okay.
by human error, I mean all the human frailties of hubris, greed, incompetence, negligence, overconfidence, all these factors, some or all of them, which caused errors to be made and these major accidents to take place. So I have described in each case what mistakes were made and how they could have been avoided. How they could have been avoided is mainly, when I put in my experience and knowledge of the subject, and I gave my views. But the common thread, you're right, is mainly, not always, but mainly human error.
Okay. Well, one of the examples I know that we've all watched the Titanic, and I think most of us
Yeah,
have heard the story of the ghost ship Mary Celeste. Reading many theories that really went, on what really went down and about all these tragedies and how they could have been avoided was actually thrilling and eye opening for me as well. And the way
hmm,
that you described of the sequences of events, it's almost as if you can just see it in front of your eyes. So I think that was very
thank you,
beautifully done in the book.
thank
Each of
you.
these disasters have basically a unique story or they impact you differently. Could you highlight one or two that left a lasting impression on on you personally, and why?
Well, I'll start with the Titanic because everyone's seen the movie, everyone knows what happened. The Titanic could have been averted so easily. But again, the hubris and overconfidence led to the ship sinking. For example, Everyone thought, the naval architects in Belfast who built the ship, and the captain, Captain Smith himself, everyone thought the ship was indestructible because it was a brand new ship, state of the art. It was unsinkable. But obviously, we know that we know what happened. Okay, so
Right.
the captain was an experienced captain, but he not only thought the ship was unsinkable, he also thought that a ship could not be damaged by an iceberg. From his
Okay.
past experience, he had sailed on a sister vessel, an identical vessel, and he had collided with a naval destroyer some time ago, and
Okay.
he had escaped unscathed. So he thought, "Arey, kuch nahi hone wala." So that overconfidence,
Overconfidence.
uh, when the ship was passing through iceberg infested waters, he was going at full sea speed because he wanted to make he didn't want to delay the ship. It was a liner service after all. He didn't want to delay the passengers. So it was going at full sea speed of 22 knots, which is about 41 kilometers an hour, through iceberg infested waters. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, ice warnings were coming, navigational warnings by wireless were coming to him, and they were all piling up on his table, on his desk from the radio operators. But he chose to ignore them. He was entertaining his guests at a 10-course dinner when this happened. So he really thought nothing would happen to the ship, but at the most, a glancing blow. But then
Right.
the ship did hit, and then the water entered, and it was not an unsinkable ship, as we all know, and more
Right.
than 1,500 lives were lost.
And people are still losing their lives even now because of that ship.
Yeah, yeah, and you must all be familiar with this Titan submersible, which
Right.
went down to look for the Titanic
Titanic.
wreck. So there also, I would say it's a very parallel incident. The Titan submersible was also designed by some guy,
Okay.
Stockton Rush of Ocean Gate, who also, it was a different kind of design with two different materials fused in. He
Okay.
also thought that his design was infallible.
Okay.
And it was this overconfidence, and the industry experts told him, no, don't do this. It should be of one material, that's titanium. But he chose
Right.
to ignore them. And when that submersible, of course, it had done a couple of trips before, but this time, when the submersible went down, the water pressure was such, it just imploded, like like crushing an empty soda can. It just imploded, and the five passengers who had paid $250,000 each per head just to
Okay.
witness the wreck of the Titanic, and they all were crushed immediately. So now the two wrecks lie close to each other at the bottom of the Atlantic. Very,
Okay.
very sad.
So what
Very sad.
basically, as a mariner and with the 4-decade-old experience that you have, what basically goes on in the mind of a captain when they foresee such imminent danger, or whom do they think that they should be saving first? Should they be saving the passengers, his mates, or the cargo, or the ship? What goes on in the mind of the mariner?
Well, to me, it is clear. If it's a choice between human lives, the ship and the cargo, all human lives first. We must save human lives first, come what may, even if we lose the ship and the cargo. And among the human lives, the passengers come first, not the crew. Why? Because the passengers are looking to us, are depending on us for their survival. They are not
Right.
trained to handle emergencies at sea, whereas the crew is trained to handle emergencies at sea, and hopefully they can look after themselves. The passengers must be saved first, then the crew, and then the captain. Okay, now if it comes to the ship or the cargo, I think the ship should come first. So the ship is saved, the ship can carry on for several more voyages. And the cargo is dispensable. The cargo, if necessary, you can jettison the cargo. The ship is aground. You can jettison the cargo. It is allowed in marine law. It is allowed in marine insurance. It has got a term for it called a general average, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and you can lighten the ship by throwing out the cargo, and then you can float free. So, I would say in that order: the
Okay.
passengers, the crew, then the ship, then the cargo.
Right. So these were some of my questions with regards to, Beat the Shok Chatterjee as a person, as a mariner, as a ship's captain. Now, coming to your book, uh, as a researcher, what kind of research did you go to for this particular book, to gather all the historical details and all the minute details that you mentioned in the book? What made, how did you do that? That is my first question. And the second question, a big part of this question is, while researching, did you uncover any surprising or little known facts that you found very intriguing?
Okay. Well, I did all my research online
Okay.
because there are no more libraries around for me to go and spend the entire day. Where are the libraries now? And fortunately, a lot of information is available on the net. So I went quite deep into the research, and I dug out old those case histories and incident reports of each uh, ship that I had selected finally. In fact, more than these 13, I read a lot of case histories and incident reports, but they were all dry. They were just. I had to make them interesting for the reader, and that's where I put in my bit. But the facts are from those from that research. So a lot of stuff is. I also saw some documentaries
Okay.
online about the ship, and I collated all the data and made some coherent chapters of my own. There was too much of information, and I condensed it to about 3,000, 3,500 words, not more than that, because I thought people will get bored if the chapter is too long. So that part is my effort. Although the information, the facts, the events, the times, the dates, etc., those are of course from in the public domain. And regarding the research, there's one thing I didn't know about. Again, we go back to the Titanic.
Okay.
There was the lookouts who first saw the iceberg. They
Right.
did not have binoculars with them. And
Oh.
why did they not? Because the binoculars were in the designated box on the ship, but it was locked and no one knew where the key was. So
Oh.
the lookouts went up on that mast without the binoculars. Now think of it. If the lookout was using the binoculars to look for ice, and he had spotted the iceberg even 1 minute before, and he
Before,
had
yeah.
reported and he had reported to the bridge navigating officer just 1 minute before.
Right.
That officer could have taken avoiding action and given the right helm order and the engine order or whatever was required, and in 1 minute that ship could easily have responded to the order and could have cleared the iceberg. So if he did
Right.
not, just because of the binoculars, this guy spotted it maybe 1 minute late, and
Right.
this disaster took place. So
Again, we
that was
come back
one
to
thing
the
that
same
comes to
point,
mind.
human folly, basically.
Human folly. Where was the key? And so that comes to mind. There were others also as well, but this one comes to mind since you just asked
Okay.
me.
So, but were there any particular challenges that you came across while writing this book, like one particular event or some of the events which challenged you, as a writer, to express them or put them in a narrative?
Yes, the challenge was uh, that I have to put my own spin to it. I mean, the facts are all there. When the Titanic sank and what was the damage caused and what was the reason, and how many people died. But I had to make it my own story, and not
Right.
only for the Titanic, for all the 13. So to put my own spin to it, and also, could the disaster have been avoided? I Of course, many of the cases, it came out in the report, like this could have been done, this could have been done. I put my own additional stuff as well. So the challenge was to make it my own story,
Right. Right.
keeping the facts without distorting any fact. So that was the challenge. Uh, Otherwise, it wasn't so difficult. I mean, thankfully, my years of experience at sea, that helped. When I start reading an incident report or one of these case studies, as I see the events unfolding, I can already sense, what is going wrong and what went wrong. So that
Right.
did help. My experience did help.
Right. So this book basically has a lot of, it has disasters covered from oil spills to, crashes to, all types of, shipwrecks. But what lessons do you hope that the readers will take away from these narratives, particularly those who may not have a background in the maritime industry or would not have any historical know-how of these shipwrecks? What is the one takeaway that you would want your readers to take from this book?
Okay, you can. I know these are marine incidents, but you can take away something from these incidents as well. That is, uh, number one, human error is the cause of most accidents, whether at sea or in the air or on the road. Human error. So uh, be careful, check, don't be complacent, don't be overconfident, take the necessary precautions. Uh, that is number one. Avoid human error as far as possible. The second is, uh, do not wait for the government or the authorities to introduce new laws before you adapt them yourself, because it may be too late. For example, that's of the Cyrus Mistry, Tata chairman, who died in
Yes.
that on the highway, the Bombay Pune highway. Immediately after that, the government had a knee-jerk reaction saying that all the people in the back seats must put on seat belts. Okay,
Right.
so government had to be seen to be doing something. So they've introduced this law. I don't know if people are still following or not, but that's besides the point. But if you are driving at 120 or 140 on a highway and you have children at the back, just put on the seatbelt anyway. Don't wait for the government to make it compulsory. So, what does common sense tell you? Observe safety precautions. So, I would say, use your common sense, don't be careless, and take precautions. So, we can all learn from these incidents in our daily lives.
Right, right. One of the most vivid images that I would be taking away from this book, aside from the Titanic incident, is the chapter on Herald of Free Enterprise, where one of the survivors compared the sinking of the ship to be like a horror movie. Where you've mentioned the quote is, "What I will never forget is having to walk on the windows. We were walking on people's faces with fists hammering on the glass." Now, that's one picture I'm unlikely to ever forget, which basically, kind of brings the whole scenario alive for the reader, and it's beautifully done. Continuing from this one statement, that my next question basically is, you have been on, this is your nonfiction work, and before this you have delivered short stories and fiction. So
Yes.
as a writer, how different is your experience from writing fiction and nonfiction, and which one is most satisfying for you?
Fiction, I would say fiction is more difficult, at least for me. Fiction, you
Okay.
have to start with a blank page. There's nothing that's going to help you, and you have to put in everything yourself and make it interesting enough for someone to want to read it. Non-fiction, the facts are already there. You can say the page is almost half full, and you have to
Right.
embellish it. You have to
Right.
embellish the facts with your own spin to it, with your own uh, angle, with your own views. So I definitely I would find I find non-fiction easier because you're not starting with a blank page in front of you.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does.
Huh.
But I'm again coming back to the book, from the
Yeah.
writer to the book. I'm jumping, and I wanted to really kind of, throw a little bit of light on the Exxon Valdez disaster, which was basically the worst oil spill in history. Uh, it was just an environment, it was an environmental disaster though, but it was caused by someone who had too much to drink. Can you just give us a brief about it so that our listeners can have a, a view of what is in store?
Yeah, when they say don't drink and drive, they also mean don't drink and navigate. You know,
Navigate.
this captain had a history of alcoholism, and the owner, Exxon Corporation, knew about it but did nothing about it. So that ship was a very large oil tanker loading oil in Alaska and for California. So it was a regular run, and they were very familiar with the port of Valdez in Alaska, where the ship would go regularly. So
Right.
on one of these voyages, the ship berthed in the morning, early morning, and by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, the captain went ashore. The ship was loading cargo, and by the time he came back in the evening, he'd obviously had a few to drink ashore. And by the time he came back, the ship had finished loading
Okay.
and was all ready to sail. So the ship did sail by 8 o'clock or so, or 9 o'clock that evening, and uh, it was already dark by then. So the port pilot came, and that is that is the job of the pilots, to take the ships out of their harbor or bring the ships in. Uh, so the port pilot came and took the ship out, but the captain was not present on the bridge. Although it's the captain's responsibility for the safety of the ship, he should have been present. He wasn't present on the bridge, and the port pilot and a junior, inexperienced third officer, they
Right.
navigated the ship out of the harbor. It's only when the port pilot was supposed to get off back and go back to shore, he insisted on the captain coming up. That's when the captain came up. Captain
Right.
came up and saw everything around him. He received some message, some call from the port control that there is some ice. There are some small icebergs right ahead.
Okay.
So he took a decision at that time. He turned the ship. Okay, it's like, suppose you're driving on the road, and
Right.
on a deserted road, say, and you find some obstruction in front of you. So what will you do? You can choose to go over to the other side of the road, the opposite side of the road, and
Right.
pass the obstruction, and then come back to your side. Okay, you
Right.
can choose to do that. So that's what the captain chose to do. But he altered the course, and it's a big, heavy ship, fully laden, very sluggish, not responsive at all. I mean, I have done a lot of these big super tankers, and I know they're very, very unresponsive. He altered the course to go to the other side of the lane, of the traffic lane. Ships also have lanes, traffic lanes in harbors. They and and he left it to the third mate without settling down on the other side. He left it. He said, "I'm going down." It was left to the third mate to go to the other side of the lane and turn at the right moment to come back after passing the iceberg, to come back on the original track. But the third mate also, he
Okay.
was a decent chap, but he was absolutely tired. He had been working right from morning, and his fatigued mind, whether uh, tests have proved whether you are tired, whether you have inadequate sleep, or whether you're drunk, the results are the same. Your situational awareness goes for a 6, and your judgment is impaired. So the third mate was also, I mean, he did not alter course in time, and the ship, with its momentum, just went straight and crashed on the rocks. And I have the map here in the book, where the reader can figure out, how the ship went.
Yeah.
And that caused the biggest
Right.
spill in US history. And because the captain did not take his responsibility seriously, and he was not there. I mean, in a situation like this, he should have been there. He's the more experienced man, and he should have
Right.
handled the navigation and steered the ship back on course. But he left it to the third mate. And why? And later, they found two more cans of beer in his cabin. That means when he came back on board, and yeah, instead of being on the bridge and navigating the ship, he was still drinking beer. So it is, I think,
Right.
inexcusable.
such carelessness. But these stories are
Absolutely.
really very interesting because it just kind of gives us a peek into a life which probably, most of us are not even aware of. We probably,
Right.
hear of incidents in news or maybe some documentary, but these are like, very closely watched and researched stories that you brought in this book. And I think it's just so interesting. I'm just going to take one question which Lalita has really posed, and this is basically posed to you as a mariner. So we have often heard that sailors are superstitious and look for omens, especially before sailing. Are there any anecdotes that you have to share?
Oh, superstitious.
Yes.
Hi, Lalita. Uh, Actually, I can't think of one at the moment. Yes, we are superstitious. If we see, you know, black seagulls, not white, it means a storm is coming. And if we see the water color changing from dark blue to light, we are heading into danger. Uh,
Okay.
and
Mr.
well,
P,
yeah, I
there
can't
seems
think
to
of.
be some static in the voice.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Um,
my
yeah.
net connection is trying.
So
Uh-huh.
some of this we couldn't hear.
Oh, I see. Okay, as I said, I'm not a superstitious person, but it has always been, like if you remember the poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where they shot the albatross and it was hung around the neck of the narrator, and it, the death of the albatross caused a lot of misfortune to the crew of that ship. So superstitions have been there from down the ages, and seamen have always been superstitious. And I personally did not have much of my own, except that whenever I used to board a new ship, I used to say a prayer to myself just before stepping on the gangway to climb up. I always did that, and fortunately, I think that stood me in good stead because I have an incident-free career. Thank God. Uh, I can't think of any other, incident at the moment.
So Lalita is actually saying that I asked this question because I love that poem, eerie as it is. So yes,
Ah,
I think she's got her answer.
okay, good.
We have
And she
another
needs to
question
read
from.
mine. I've been asking Lalita to read Driftwood and give me a review because she gave me such a fabulous review for the People Tree.
Yes,
But the past 2 years, she hasn't been doing that.
yes, she is. She is. So
Not enough.
Lalita, your next project is, yeah, to read Driftwood and review that book. Moving on to another question. This is a question which is coming from Urmi, and she says aircraft pilots
Ah.
have very stringent no partying, no drinking, 8 to 10 hours sleep, etc. before they fly. Do mariners also have these rules with regard to this U.S. oil spill case that we were discussing right now?
You're absolutely correct, Urmi. The rules did not, why did we hear of so many stories of drunken sailors and, you know, uh, blowing up all their money in ports and girls in every port? It's because these rules were not there. And the Exxon Valdez incident, the one I narrated just now, that was significant
Right.
in introducing all these new laws. And now it has become, I mean, it has become impossible. Now, most shipping companies have a zero alcohol policy, and they are absolutely, it's become very, very restricted now. Most companies do not allow a drop of alcohol on board, and those that do, they allow you on a very limited amount of beer per day. It's measured in ounces. So it's maybe one can or maximum two cans per day. So it is, yeah, a lot of restrictions have come. And as like airline pilots, here also, you're not allowed to drink 24 hours before arriving port. You're not allowed to drink 4 hours before going on your navigation watch, etc. So you're correct. Those rules are now in place.
Right. And now this takes me to my next question, which is about this Halifax explosion, which is considered to
Ah,
be the largest man-made explosion disaster in history till the Hiroshima bombing. Would you like to share with us a little bit about the Halifax explosion?
yeah, it's the largest, as you said, it's the largest explosion in man-made explosion in history till the atom bomb hit Hiroshima. And it was such a disaster that 2,000 people died on the spot, 9,000 people were injured, and most of the town of Halifax in eastern Canada was razed to the ground. The
Oh,
debris from the ship reached 3-4 kilometers away,
away.
and then now there are shrines wherever the debris landed, and they have made some shrine with some like a monument.
Yeah.
So it was. And why did this happen?
Yeah,
Because
why did this happen?
the two ships were on a head-on collision course, and they refused to give way to each other. It's like, again, I bring back the analogy of driving on the road, and you find another car coming directly at you from the wrong side, and you press your horn and you ask him to get away, and he presses his horn and asks you to get away. Why? Because you know I'm the
Might.
bigger ship or
Yeah,
something.
the
So
might.
the stupidity and the carelessness of the two navigators on board caused such a massive explosion because neither one was willing to give way to the other. Of
To the
course,
other.
the ship which exploded was carrying munitions. Uh, that was he was in the right track. He was following the rules, but it was the other ship that was in the wrong lane coming at a fast speed, and he did not give way to this
Give way
ammunition.
to the other.
So again, a lot of mistakes were made, and it is again unforgivable. So if
Right.
I mean, it could have been so avoidable. It could have been
Yeah,
avoided,
this is
and so many
completely
lives could
avoidable.
have been saved. It took years for the town of Halifax to come back to shape.
Come back to. Okay, another disaster which I'd like to highlight is the MV Kairali, India's own version of the ill-fated Malaysian 370, so to say. What it is actually a mind-boggling mystery. Can you throw some light on this as well?
Yeah, just like that Malaysian 370 plane, this ship, Indian
Yeah.
ship, disappeared into thin air in the Arabian Sea, just 2-3 days off the Indian coast, and its 50 Indian crew members were never seen or heard of again till date. Nobody knows what happened, but it is believed the ship did not sink. Why? Because if a ship sinks to the bottom of the sea, it is believed that with constant pressure over days and weeks and months, the parts of the ship are likely to give way, and it's bound to rupture, and the oil from the fuel tanks is bound to come and float up. There
Right.
was no debris, there was no telltale sign of any kind that a ship had sunk. Even the ropes from the rope lockers, etc., the ship's mooring ropes would also, anything light would have floated to the surface. There was not a speck of debris on the that came out from the ship. So it is believed the ship did not sink. Now,
Right.
if it did not sink, then where did it go?
Where did it go?
Yeah. So there are a lot of conspiracy theories which I've included. And the best part is that there was no formal investigation into this incident. The investigation was quashed by the Kerala government and the Kerala Shipping Company. It was a Kerala shipping government shipping company which owned the ship, and the ministers, the politicians, and the bureaucrats at that time. This is 1979. They colluded to make sure that no formal investigation took place. So what were they trying to hide? So again, since the ship disappeared and nobody knows what happened and there are no survivors, there's very little information out there on the net. What I accessed were blogs by the relatives of the deceased. They had put up some blogs and they gave out a lot of information which is not there in the, available. So from there, I made something coherent on Kerala. And there was a movie being made. A Malayalam movie was being made called Kerali, which gave its own conspiracy theory. But the movie has not been completed. Why is that? I don't know. Have they again cost the making of the film, or did they run out of funds? I don't know. I could not find the reason why the movie is no longer being made.
There could be conspiracy theories about the movie also.
Absolutely. So this
We
was
never
one
know.
mystery, but that was never solved.
Okay, great. How about the Seoul case, the South Koreans ferry disaster, where 325 school students, along with so many civilians, were killed due to the human hubris?
Yeah, again, the Sewol, this happened in 2014. The Sewol was a passenger ferry, which was inter-island passenger ferry, which was flying between the South Korean mainland and some islands called Jeju Islands, which was a tourist destination. So they were doing this trip twice a week, very regular stuff. So on that fateful voyage, what happened? There were about 325 school students who were going on an overnight picnic to these islands. So one fine, clear morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, the officer on watch suddenly uh, altered course, gave a very large helm, and when the ferry started altering course, she tilted over and capsized him. Now, why did the officer do that? We don't know because she didn't survive. We couldn't. She cannot give you any answer. It was a she, but but what happened after that is even more inexcusable. Okay, things happen. People do make mistakes, but still, the people could have been rescued. We were quite close to the shore.
Close
I
to
mean,
the
we were
shore.
not in the middle of the Pacific. So, however, the captain at that time came on the bridge and saw that the ship was tilting and about to cap. He announced that everybody must stay in their cabins and you will be rescued. Do not come out on deck. Stay in your cabin. Stay where you are, and you will be rescued. And that the students, young children, ranging from maybe 10 to 15. So they are used to obeying authority. They are used to taking orders. So they did what they were told to do. They all huddled in cabins and waited for the rescue that never came. The captain, and when the fishing boats came and the Coast Guard came to find out what's happening, the captain was the first to jump into the water and swim to the nearest boat and be rescued. So he was one of the first to abandon ship without revoking his order, without telling the passengers and the students to come out and come on deck and jump to abandon ship. I mean, the proper order would have been to abandon ship. He did not. So the students still waited for that rescue. And the ship sank. By the afternoon, the ship sank. And then over the next few days, the divers came and they started going down to look for bodies. And they found these corpses still hugging each other, huddled in each cabin in groups, waiting for that rescue, which never came.
It was such a
And
tragedy.
there were other people at fault. There were other people at fault also. For example, the president of South Korea, one President Park, at that time, she received the news in the morning. Again, it's a she, but I'm not saying anything about that. That I don't mean. But she was a lady. She received the news in the morning, but did nothing about it. She did her hair first. Then she had a meeting with some spiritual leader, which was scheduled. And it was only in the late afternoon at about 5 p.m. that she attended a meeting where she was briefed on this disaster. And later in the press conference, she said it was a minor ferry disaster. By then, the ship had already sunk with hundreds of passengers gone, gone down with the ship. The media was very quick on the scene, but they brought their helicopters and they were hovering around. And they were more interested not in the rescue, but to keep filming the procedures so that they could feed their 24/7 news channels. The Coast Guard was also, they came an hour late. They did nothing. They didn't approach the ship. They didn't climb up on the ship and break the glass and try to bring out the passengers and the children. No. They waited on their boats, and anyone who jumped off the ship and swam to them, they picked them up. That's all they did. They were just like bystanders. So there were so many people that fought, and it was done so badly. There was such apathy about the whole incident that it's really inexcusable. And hundreds of children died. And ironically, the only kids who disobeyed the order and who went up on deck and found the ship tilting, they jumped overboard. They were the only ones who
Who was
survived.
saved?
Yeah.
Well, listening to all these stories, Lalita says, I'm never setting foot on a ship or a ferry again. I'll stick to land and air.
No, don't worry. Singapore is very, very strict with their maritime rules. You'll be
Right.
safe, Lalita. Don't worry.
Right. But yes, of course, these stories that you have here in this book, some of them are really shocking, and some of them are very, they're actually a revelation, because not many of them are known, or probably have not been, have not garnered that much of attention. But what has the reaction been for your book? And I think Urmi is also asking you a similar question that I had. In many stories, you added your personal observation and inference and critique of the government, of the shipping firm, of the laws, etc. Has that ruffled feathers anywhere? Have you received any negative feedback on that?
No, because I don't think the powers that be have. I have not blamed anyone. I have not taken names. I think, and definitely, I have not blamed any Indian authorities.
Right,
I did actually, but that incident took place in 1979, the Karauli incident,
right.
and I don't think they're around anymore to bother me. So, fortunately, no, I have not received any negative feedback, and fortunately, again, the book has done well, and it is the most successful of my books, Touchwood. It was number one on the Amazon history bestseller list for quite some time.
Yeah.
So that was a very pleasant surprise. I'm glad people are, reading the book, and I think it'll be money well spent if they read it, because it is good knowledge, and it's good a slice of maritime history that you're reading, and you
Absolutely.
can learn from it. It'll improve one's general knowledge, something to talk about.
It is
So,
actually a very interesting book. And if you
mm,
can see, there is, its cover is okay. My camera is a bit hazy, but
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
the
yeah.
cover is beautiful, and it is done
Mm.
by Beat Ashok's daughter. And
Yeah,
even
the
the
one and
illustrations
only
inside have been done by
Uttara
his
Chatterjee.
daughter.
Yeah, I'm very proud of my daughter for having done the artwork, and the book doesn't do justice to her art. I really, because the size of the book was such that you had to
Yeah,
condense her drawings,
of course.
but
The
her
pictures have
attention. For example, now this is the drawing of the Mary Celeste. I mean, look at the stormy seas.
right,
Imagine a ghost ship, at sea like this. Or
right.
let me uh, the this is the tiny image of the Halifax explosion.
Halifax explosion.
Yeah, the ammunition ship that exploded and destroyed the town. So uh, they are. I have the images in my laptop, and I can magnify them, and I can see the attention to detail she has put.
Right.
Unfortunately, the reader will not be able to see that, because the images have been condensed so much. But she's done a good job, and she is helping me with another project.
Oh, that's
Uh,
lovely.
she's
We would like to know what is in store for your readers. Uh, what is the theme? I'm not going to ask too much, because I know you would like to keep it under wraps. But what exactly is it? Fiction, non-fiction? What is going to be the theme of your next book?
fiction,
Okay.
and uh, short stories again. I'm going back to my comfort zone of short stories. So
Okay.
I have a collection of sea stories ready
Okay.
already, and
Okay.
maybe later on, after this is over and it gets published, by some kind, benevolent publisher. Then I will I'll try and do a full-length novel.
That's lovely.
That's the plan, anyway. Yeah.
That's great. Great. We are looking forward to it, Bitashok. We also have another question which has come from Monica, and she says Mayday is very information heavy. As a non-fiction writer, how does one balance the information within the narrative so it doesn't impact the reader experience in a negative way?
Yeah. I had to straddle both seafarers and faring readers. You know, the fluff, you can call it, was for the non-seafarers. You know, the action and the dramatization, etc. But
Right.
the seafaring reader would be more discerning in the sense that he would want to know facts and a little more about what happened, how did it happen, and what wrong decisions were made. So if you found this more too information heavy, I apologize. But that was keeping the seafaring, my contemporaries, my fellow captains and chief engineers who would want to read the book. I wrote it for them also. At one stage, I have apologized also. In one of the chapters on Exxon Valdez, I have kind of, in brackets, I have apologized for the extra detail because I just thought they might want to know the actual, nitty gritty of what happened and how it happened. So yes, I have put in a little extra information, but that is not, you can ignore it if you like and stick to
But
the
she's
outline.
still saying that it is a fantastic book, and she's really enjoyed reading it, and she wishes you
Thank you.
luck.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Monica.
there are so many compliments which are actually coming your way, Bitashuk. I'm going to be highlighting a few here. Deepa says that thanks for bringing these events to our notice through your book because it feels like a tribute to all the souls who are lost at sea. So
Oh,
that
thank
is
you
one
so much. That's a
compliment.
very nice thing to say, Deepa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we also have another thought from Shashikala ji. She says just a thought that had it been a fiction, how different would it be in terms of description, characters, incidents? So then you would have to have 15 fictionalized stories woven around the disasters.
Okay, that's a good question. If it had to be fiction, I would have, as Monica said, that if I would have cut down the information. I would have cut down the information and introduced more drama, more masala, and to make it readable. But then I had to keep those seafarers in mind, and I had to keep in mind that this is finally, at the end of the day, it's a
Non-fiction.
non-fiction book. It's a slice of maritime history that I'm writing. So I had to keep the facts also on.
Absolutely. Oops. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Another question which I had noted down and I've lost it kind of, but but most of our viewers here are writers and readers. Would you like to say something to them or give them some tips on writing non-fiction? Like, how do you perceive that an ideal non-fiction should be served?
Okay, I don't like giving advice to writers because they're probably better writers than I am. So yeah. I'm no great
You're
shakes.
just too humble.
No, I'm just being truthful. Yeah. So nor am I an expert on non-fiction because
This is your first.
I've written only one non-fiction book. But however, if you're writing non-fiction, number one, the main thing which one should be careful of is that you should not be accused of plagiarism. It should not be a cut and paste job where people can easily find, अरे यार तुमने तो यहाँ से लिखा है. So that would be very embarrassing. Plus, it could lead to legal hassles. You must make it your own story, and you must quote the references that you got it from. You must quote the references because you have nothing to hide. It is your own story. You have written it in your own words, but you have got the materials from here and there, and so you just quote that. So be open about it. That's the main thing. And second thing is make it interesting. Don't
Right.
make it dry. Don't make it like a case study or an incident report. The kind of stuff that I had to read. So these are the two tips that come to mind right now.
Right, right. Well, this has been amazing, Mr. B. Thank you so much for talking to us today. As we move away
My
from this
pleasure.
conversation, I'd once again like to highlight the books that Mr. B has written before: Driftwood and The People Tree. And this is his third offering, Mayday. I would urge, oh yes, Driftwood and People Tree, there they are. Beautiful covers, very enticing, inviting covers, and the books are really nice. Some of the stories I have read in these books, and I think these are great for people who enjoy reading short stories, because you will absolutely love them. I am in the middle of Mayday. I haven't yet completed Mayday, but some of the stories I read them, and I would urge you to pick this up as well, because it really has a lot of information. But apart from the information, the writing is beautifully, executed, and it's the dramatization and the way that it has been, written. It does not really seem drab. It is inviting. It is interesting. And before we
Thank you
wrap
so
up,
much for saying that.
before we wrap up, thank you, viewers, for joining us today and engaging with us with all your questions. You have always been fantastic. Please go ahead and pick up Mayday, and it's available free on Kindle Unlimited. So please do pick it, but buy a paper book, because you would want to go ahead and see those images that are there. The illustrations, they're beautiful in there. And
And you'll be
that's
helping
all.
the publishing industry, which is in
Yes.
doldrums.
Yes, yes, please support the publishing industry so that we also stay in business.
Yes, exactly.
Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Beetashok Chatterjee. It is always a pleasure talking to you, because we do gain a lot of information and knowledge from you every time we interact with you. Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you, Kajol. Thank you, everybody. I enjoyed this session very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.